In this skill builder video, I'm going to share with you how to make a strip set, and I'm going to give you 3 tips so you can get the straightest, most accurate strip set possible. For this video, I'm sewing strips from a jilly roll for my pathways pattern, but this tutorial and tips apply to any strip set you're making, large like this one or small. All right, so first thing you need to do is lay out your fabric strips in the order they go. So mine are going in this order from light to dark. And then we can start pairing them up. So these are going to go. So I'm going to open up my jelly roll strips. Mine are quite long. So 2.5 inches by the width of the fabric. So selvage to selvage. And I'm just going to put these right sides together. I'm using solid fabric, so there is no right sides together. But if you're using prints, you want to put yours right sides together. So this strip is ready to go. This pair rather. And then I'm going to pair these guys up. So again, pair them up right sides together. And then line up the raw edges. These 2 pairs are ready to go through my sewing machine. All right, tip number 1. When you're sewing your strip sets, you want to consider shortening your stitch length. So normally I sew at around 1.8, but because I'm stitching a strip set, I want to just shorten my stitch length just a little bit because your strip set is going to be cut up. So we just want to make our stitches a little bit tighter to prevent any unraveling. All right, now that I've got a shortened stitch length, I am going to sew these strips together. Now, as you're sewing, you probably want to be sewing with a scant 1/4 inch foot or seam allowance, depending on your pattern. All right, there's my first strip pair sewn. Now I'm going to sew my next one. Repeat that process. So as I'm sewing, I'm slowing down where I need to, making sure my seam is as straight as I can manage, and making sure I keep lining up my raw edges here as needed. All right, and there is set, or pair number 2 rather. Now my next step in this process is to press the seams that I just sewed. Now normally I would press on my larger ironing board for these long strip sets, but because I'm filming here for you, I am on my shorter ironing board here. All right, so here is how you press. Now first you're going to press to set the seam. So press the entire length of your strip set, large or small. And then press your seams open or to the side as directed by your pattern. So my pattern calls for the seams to be open, so I'm going to press them open. Now here is the second tip I'm going to share with you. So when you're pressing, you want to take extra care to press and not iron. So what that looks like is as you are pressing, make sure that you are lifting your iron up and down and not doing any back and forth motion. That will prevent any warping, and so you'll hopefully get some nice straight seams. All right, so what you see me doing is I am opening up my fabric unit pretty side down, and I am finger pressing first, and then I'm basically chasing my fingers down, pressing my seams open. And then once you have your seams pressed open, flip your pair over to the pretty side and press. And as you're pressing, make sure you're lifting your iron up and down and not doing any back and forth motion. And that's going to help you get nice and straight seams. All right, so I've got one pair fully pressed And now I'm going to repeat the process with my second pair. I'll meet you back here for the next step and next tip. All right, so at this point, I've got my pairs sewn together, and my next step is to sew these pairs together to complete my strip set. Now, before I do, I want to share my third tip for you, and this is the most important tip to keep in mind when you're sewing your strip sets. So basically, you want to alternate the direction you're sewing. For these pairs, I was sewing this direction ideally. So now when I sew these together, I want to sew in this direction. So I'm going to put these right sides together, and this side is going to go through my sewing machine first. All right, so I'm going to put these right sides together here, and I'm going to line up the raw edges just up here just to get me going, and I'll correct it as I go through, as I feed this strip set through my sewing machine. All right, so as I sew, I am going to make sure my raw edges stay as lined up as possible. I'm going to try to sew my seam so it's as straight as possible. All right, at this point, I have my pairs of strips sewn together into my strip set, and my last step is to press my seam. So I'm going to repeat the process. So I'm going to press to set the seam all the way through, and then I am going to press my seams according to the pattern. So for me, I am pressing them open. So first I'm going to finger press, and then I'm going to press all the way through. And remember, when you're pressing, make sure you're lifting your iron up and down. And if you have to go back and correct some seams that flip, go ahead and do that. And then flip it over to the pretty side and finish pressing. And then I actually have a bonus tip for you. All right, so at this point, I've got my strip set all done and pressed. And then my last step, I might consider spraying it with some light starch just so my strip set stays nice and sturdy when I take my strip set to my next step, which is cutting this up. So that is my bonus tip here. I've got Best Press in my spray bottle here, and I just might take the extra time and press with that starch just to make sure everything is nice and sturdy as I go to my next step. And of course, as you're doing this last step, make sure you're lifting your iron up and down so you're not warping any seams. So look how nice and straight these seams are for us. All right, so that is it. That is how I make a strip set. And in this video, I shared with you my 3 tips to help me get nice straight seams and avoid any warping for my strip sets. And I shared with you a bonus tip. Now this strip set became part of a jelly roll friendly pattern I call Pathways. To get the Pathways pattern and full step-by-step tutorial, visit the linked information in the description. And if you have any tips or tricks you'd like to share when it comes to making strip sets, feel free to share them in the comments. Happy quilting!